Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance coming to you from the state capital, Sacramento, California. We are joined by Betty Yee. She is a member of the Board of Equalization, also a candidate for controller of the state of California. That election will be held in June 2014. I must ask you, Madam Yee, what is happening here? Yes. You had a little accident, I must say.
I did. Driving and drinking hot tea from a travel mug, and the lid gave way. So I just would say to viewers, please drive with caution and be sure your lids are screwed on tight.
And I remember last year you also hurt your ankle.
I did. I fractured my foot, so but I think we are on our way to health. So
I would hope
healing
so.
nicely. Yeah.
And I am sure, and I'm glad to say the state of California is healing nicely.
Yes.
When you look at the fiscal order of the state of California, I mean, it's amazing what a difference a year or two makes.
Yes.
We are seeing significant surpluses. How is this happening?
You know, we are seeing some great economic recovery in some great parts of the state. We are seeing just revenues continue to perform well, and the temporary tax increases that was enacted by the voters last November is certainly helping our budget situation.
And let's talk about taxes,
Yes.
because even though it's January, February, the reality is that now we have to start thinking about tax time.
Yes.
April 15th is just around the corner.
That's right.
And I am terrible. April 14th is a miserable day for me. But let's talk about what we can do to start preparing.
Absolutely. We can actually take the stress away from the situation if we start preparing early. So January is a very important month. The filing season has started with the Franchise Tax Board for state purposes. For the federal government, because of the temporary federal shutdown of the federal government last year, they're going to start their tax filing season towards the end of January.
Got it. That being said, there are different ways to address your tax obligations. I think it's so often confused that if you file for an extension, the extension is a filing simply to ask that you provide your forms in 6 months.
That's
it has nothing to do with when you have to pay.
Yes, very important point. When if people need to file an extension, can't make that April 15th deadline, that's only an extension for filing the return, not for payment of any tax. Any tax that is due should be estimated and still paid by April 15th.
And let's talk about estimating taxes,
yes.
because there are really, in the 21st century, so many of us are not what we call W-2 employees. Mm-hmm. We're 1099,
yes.
or freelancers, I guess you could call it.
Yes.
And so there are different strategies in terms of paying your taxes.
Yes.
One could pay quarterly.
Yes.
Is that not one
That's
way
exactly
to try to avoid a tax penalty if there's some confusion about what your obligations will be?
And that's really what a lot of advisors will say to taxpayers. If you are self-employed or working under a contract, really take care of your tax obligations as you go along and pay your estimated tax payments on a quarterly basis.
And we should also be aware that right around this time, certain forms should be arriving from various entities.
Yes.
From whom should we be receiving tax forms?
Absolutely. So this is the time to really pay attention to your mail. W-2s from your employers will show your earnings for the prior year. Very, very important, the basis of your tax return. Any bank statements that show interest that was earned on accounts. Mortgage interest statements from lenders, very, very key. And of course, if you own investment property, you want to keep all of your records that you already have on your own, which are rental receipts and any improvements or repairs that you've done on rental property.
I want to ask about what happens if there should be a change in familial situation.
Yes.
What should we do to prepare?
You know, to the extent that there has been changes in your family situation, say going through a divorce or a separation, you want to be sure that everything related to that divorce or separation is documented. So if there's any alimony that's owed, any other kind of payments that may have tax consequences, you want to have those records intact.
When we come back, I want to talk about some more notes, more ideas we should have about filing taxes.
Yes.
We're speaking with Betty Yee for our viewers on HLN. Thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So I want to ask you about some unique changes that have occurred over the last tax year.
Yes.
One of them deals with those individuals that will be considered married individuals.
Yes.
A married couple.
Yes.
What happened last year?
Last year we had the United States Supreme Court strike down provisions of the Defense of Marriage Act, and so we have marriage equality that is now legal in California. And as a result of that, the federal government will be recognizing same-sex couples who are married in California as married for federal tax purposes.
And that's an obligation.
It is. It is a requirement now that these couples filed and their status being married filed jointly or married filed separately, but they are, under the eyes of the Internal Revenue Service, married.
So there's no choice. I mean, it's funny, be careful what you wish for.
That's right.
I mean,
right.
some talk about the marriage penalty. I'm not an accountant, I don't know if that's legitimate or not, but be that as it may, you must file now as a married couple.
That's exactly right.
What about those that may have suffered some loss last year? We know the rim fire occurred. There were
Yes.
some
Yes.
events that may have caused some dislocation.
Absolutely. So casualty losses are something that can be deducted, and so we ask taxpayers to look at the relevant guidance that's being issued by the Internal Revenue Service, by the State of California Franchise Tax Board, to really understand what can be claimed in terms of their losses.
We also know that the Homeowners Bill of Rights is really kicking in
Yes.
over the last year or so, and so some banks are offering relief
Yes.
to those homeowners that may be underwater.
Yes.
But many of those homeowners may not realize that if the bank does offer you relief, there may be a tax consequence, and some would argue one that may not be welcome, but one we just have to accept.
Yes, yes,
So
exactly.
talk to us about that.
Yeah, so one of the provisions that I think many Californians will be interested in is what happens when your home goes through a short sale. And many homes did as a result of the mortgage crisis. And the relief aspect of that is the short sales generally now can be counted towards any capital gains exclusion for property. So California did conform with that provision of the federal law. But in terms of other mortgage forgiveness, there still might be some tax consequences.
So if, for example, you owed $500,000 on your mortgage, and it wound up that through a short sale, the obligation was reduced to $400,000. What happens with that at $100,000?
You know, that is potentially, depending on the situation, could be subject to tax.
Could be a taxable event.
Could be a taxable event. But the $400,000, I mean, to the extent there's no gain,
Right.
then yeah.
Clearly no gain.
Right.
Oh, right. So what you're saying is it could be what if you're on the other side?
Right, right.
So you do have a gain less than you would hope, but there was still some mortgage forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's incredibly complicated.
It's very complex, and this is one provision that we really would ask that taxpayers do seek advice. These complicated mortgage situations has every homeowner probably facing a different situation.
Right around this time, so many of parents of high school students the nerves are frayed because college acceptances are coming in.
Yes.
And the bills for college are about to come due, or they'll be due in a few months. What many parents may not realize is there is now a tax credit.
Yes.
It's a federal credit, and it's fairly new, am I right, Betty?
It is fairly new,
Yeah,
yes.
and so what is the credit for education? And again, it's only for college. It's not those that may send their children to independent schools,
That's
K-12.
right. That's right.
But there is a credit.
Yes, so it's called the American Opportunity Credit. There's also another one called the Lifelong Learning Credit.
Right.
But the whole point of these is to try to help defray some of the expenses for education. And so this will really be more than likely for students who are going to college, incurring expenses like books and tuition
Right.
and others. And there are maximums for what the credit can be in terms of what is claimed. It's about $2,500 per eligible student, but that is there, and that is the whole point, is to help defray some of that college cost.
Now, looking forward, there is a credit I think it's critical that every business owner be aware, and that is the new employment credit. This is looking on a
Yes.
go-forward basis. What
Yes.
is that?
So the new employment credit is a way for employers to get some relief for hiring people who lived in coming from distressed areas, economically disadvantaged areas. And the credit is a percentage of wages that are paid to that qualified employee. So it's a very, very important credit, not only in terms of encouraging employers to offer jobs to those who are economically disadvantaged, but it's paying for a good part of the wages.
Her name is Betty Yee. She is a member of the Board of Equalization, also a candidate for controller. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition. California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance coming to you from the state's capital in Sacramento, California. We are joined by Steve Fox. He is a member of the California State Assembly, and since I've known you, you've been an advocate for veterans.
Correct. I'm actually on the State Veterans Committee. My father was a vet, and I promised him that I would look after the veterans, and I've done just that. In fact, right now I've sponsored 2 new bills that will help veterans.
And let's talk about them specifically and uniquely and individually. The first one deals with transition programs. And sir, you know as well as anyone that it can be so very difficult to come back to society after having served time in the theaters.
Well, and especially once they're out into the civilian population,
right.
They're anxious to get there, so they don't get time to really find out all the benefits that are available to them. And there's benefits that the federal government issues, and there's special benefits that are here in California. So what I've done is issue a bill to make the Veterans Department create a TAP program, a transition program, where they're given all the California benefits. There's for small business loans if they're a California vet, there's special education loans. In fact, if you're from California and you've left California, we can get rid of your out-of-state tuition requirements. So there's a lot of things that are available for vets they may not realize.
Right.
And this will give them a hand up.
Is there a way to get that information to them in a simple, straightforward fashion?
I think there is. We're going to make sure it's on the website. We're going to make sure there's they're going to have classes on it, a booklet, but we're directing the Veterans Department to put all that together. That's one of my bills.
But what about the interplay between the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs and the State Department?
Well, there's already a TAP program for the federal government,
okay.
But there's nothing for and they're here in California, and there's benefits that are unique to California.
Right.
And they deserve, I mean, they've done a lot, veterans have done a lot for us. We wouldn't have our freedoms without them. They deserve to be put back in the position they would have been but for their service.
Right.
They deserve an even playing field.
No, I understand. You also have proposed a bill. It's known as 585, and it deals with unused or underutilized properties, which we know the state has a significant amount of that.
We've got 8 different veterans homes. One of them are in my district.
Okay.
And the problem is they have property, and sometimes it sits there. What we want to do is inventory it, and then set a direction, a grand scheme or plan on how to use it for the future. And this way they're treated as a system, not an individual house. So this gets everybody moving in the right direction. Again, I'm looking for areas, how can I help veterans? How can I give them another chance? We've also done quite a bit last year.
Yeah, please, let's talk about some of the successes of last year because they were significant. I understand on the Veterans Affairs Committee, there were 18 bills approved that grew up in the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Assembly, and 16 got signed.
That's absolutely correct. There's a number of them. Speaker of the House, John Perez, sponsored a bill which I co-authored, which puts away $600 million bond to be voted on, which not only puts housing back for veterans, but gives them additional education and transition benefits.
Okay.
So that's another key bill that I believe are going to help veterans. We also recognize that the families of veterans have also suffered quite a bit too. So when spouses have passed the civil service test, it also puts that spouse at the top of the list for civil service. So what we're doing is, how can we take the entire picture, the global picture, to help a veteran? Because it's quite a bit to get through what they've gone through, and then to be able to transition to earn a living. In fact, what we also realize is that most of the veterans in our country are right here in California.
It's true.
And they're not getting access to a lot of the medical benefits. Sometimes there's not a veterans hospital in their area. They're not getting the different medical needs that they have.
And you mentioned earlier that a bill that was also grown out of Veterans Affairs has passed and been signed, dealing with a 1-year exemption for non-resident tuition if that veteran had lived in California.
Yeah, what we find is California has an additional tuition if you're from out of state. But what we did is we passed a bill that if you were originally from California and then you've gone to another state or you've served elsewhere, you're not going to be hit with that out-of-state tuition.
When we come
deserve
back,
what everybody else has.
When we come back, I want to continue the conversation. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, sir, I wanted to speak with you about the state budget. As you know, Governor Brown recently proposed his budget for fiscal year 14-15. Boy, what a difference a few years makes. We are in surplus as opposed to deficit. What's the early verdict, in your mind, on the governor's proposal?
Well, it's basically a good proposal. It still has to go through the process of dealing with the Assembly, but it's a conservative, responsible budget, and that's the way it should be. We have a balanced budget. He put $2.5 million in a rainy day fund, and he underestimated the revenue by another $2 billion. So what you've got is that we recognize that we were doing better, but we're not just spending it. We're recognizing that we have to plan for the future. We have to look long term. We can't have a good day today and balance it on the backs of our grandchildren. You know, if you want a good budget, it demands constant vigilance, and that's exactly what he's doing.
I want to ask you about the rainy day fund because it's kind of become the buzzword in Sacramento. We need to create a rainy day fund. We need to build this up. But technically, we have a rainy day fund. You know, the voters in 2004 passed Prop 58, which created a rainy day fund. But what we know is, for whatever reason, that mechanism was not effective. It hasn't been funded for years. So where do we go to make sure that the rainy day fund is just that, is funded properly, and is accessed only when truly needed?
Because we've just done it. I mean, that's the reality. We had one last year. Now we have a $2.5 billion, and we've underestimated the revenue on purpose. We have our own budget to experts who have told us that the governor is not estimating how much that is actually coming in. We think that's a good idea that he's holding off. You only want to use the money if God forbid, something bad happens,
right,
such as the real estate market going down.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, what happens to education? What happens to veterans' benefits? What happens to it all? Now we have some protection. That gives you a peace of mind.
What's your sense of what the governor calls the wall of debt? The money that we owe because we hit the recession and we took out loans, high interest loans because we have pension obligations, retiree obligations.
It's like credit cards. You have to pay them off so you don't have interest. And what we've done is we allowed the different school districts to take out loans when things were bad. We've just allocated another $22 billion for education. 8.5 pays off all those loans and debts. We're paying off our credit cards. We're not letting them get stiffer interest. We're not passing the problem to another year. We're handling it right now.
What about pensions, though? Because that is a long-term obligation. You know, you mentioned education, CalSTRS, the teacher's pension in some serious shape. I know CalPERS and CalSTRS, the stock market's done well, so we do see a bit of a turnaround, but this is challenging.
Well, you know, those people worked for their pensions. They detrimentally relied. They put in their years of service. We have an obligation to protect those pensions.
So what do we do? I'm not at this point saying, you know, let's try to undo the pension obligation as maybe the mayor of San Jose may want to do, but what can we do to make sure that we have funded this? Because at this stage, as I understand it, our pension obligations are underfunded by $218 billion. It's a lot of money.
Well, I think the important thing is that we ensure that there's only conservative investing. We don't take chances.
Okay.
I think if you look at long-term bonds or some other mechanism like that, that you can be assured of a certain return. We shouldn't be playing around with people's futures. We've had a conservative budget. We've balanced it. We put a rainy day fund. We're going to protect your pensions. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to act like this is a business.
You are running for re-election in a district that some would call maybe purple. Should we call it a purple district?
Let's call it a responsible district.
A responsible district. And the reason I ask you this is I want to get a sense from you, since you are running in a district where you need to run. It's not a sure thing like some districts where they're either very red or very blue. What are your voters saying to you?
Well, first you have to remember I was a Republican for 30 years. I changed my party to being a Democrat because the Republican Party had left us, and I was elected as the first Democrat in 34 years. I was elected as the people's candidate. My office has half Republicans and half Democrats working in it. It's the people's office. This isn't about party, this is about helping our community.
What do your voters say about the fact that you have become a Democrat?
Nobody's looking at party. They're looking, what have you done? I brought $2.7 million of redevelopment money back to Palmdale in order to build 1,000 houses. I was able to bring $3.6 million back in order to have more resources that they could get for the renewables. I was able to get an audit on the water districts to find out why government is overcharging the public. So what I'm doing is helping the general public. Again, this isn't party, this is about my community.
His name is Steve Fox. He is a member of the California State Assembly. He represents significant portions of the Antelope Valley. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are coming to you from Sacramento, California, the state's capital. We are joined by Cheryl Brown. She is a member of the California State Assembly. You just finished your first year in office, had 2 bills signed. We congratulate you, of course. One of the bills focuses upon veterans, and you have been working hard to protect veterans. Talk to us about the bill and what it does.
You know, so many, the veterans have I should say that CalWorks,
Right.
people who get CalWorks.
Which is the
they
state's welfare program.
Right. They get a $200 disregard of their salaries or the money that comes in.
Right.
The veterans were having that count against them. So what this bill did was to bring them in alignment, so that now
Very simple.
Yeah. So that now you can say that they're making, you know, $200 more
Right.
a month than they would have been.
And how does it make you feel that you've been able to help and protect the veterans?
You know, we don't do enough for our veterans. And I am doing whatever I can to make sure that life is better for them. We should not have homeless veterans. We should not have veterans that have so many needs and have so many wants.
Right.
We should be taking care of them. They have fought for us. My father was a veteran. Let me start back. My grandfather fought in World War I
Wow.
and was gassed. And I remember him in his uniform. My father was in World War II. My brother, Fred Minter, in Los Angeles, he was in Vietnam. So we've had, you know, a series of veterans in our family. And I come from a community where Norton Air Force Base, it left the veterans of California
in San Bernardino.
San
It's
Bernardino.
now closed, which is another
Right.
tragedy in itself.
That's
But that's a side note.
horrible tragedy
Right,
because
right.
it's sitting and not really,
Right.
it's not doing anything.
We also know that in the Inland Empire there was significant dislocation as a result of the housing crisis. Some folks moved into what is known as manufactured homes, mobile homes. They can be beautiful, no doubt about it. Some, unfortunately, were taking advantage. And so there was a court case which ruled that because mobile homes were not property per se,
Real
that
property.
these individuals may not have to pay on their obligations.
Right.
And so you were looking to clean that up, not even so much to protect the banks, but to ensure that other folks could get lending on these
Right.
manufactured homes. Explain.
Yeah, because what happened in, I think it's called the Vieira case. What
Exactly.
happened was the family, it was judged
Right.
that they wouldn't have to pay
Right.
because it wasn't real property.
Right.
Well, my bill now makes, and then what happened was banks stopped loaning.
For
on-
these manufactured
for
homes.
these
Why would they?
manufactured homes. So-
People could default without any consequence.
And this is a very, when you start thinking about affordable housing, this is a great affordable housing opportunity. And our people really need those in the Inland Empire. So what happened with the court case and with my bill and being signed was now it becomes real property. And the banks now are starting to lend on them.
Which is so critical because
is.
you shouldn't be that the bad eggs are able to use some type of legal exception
Right.
and impact so many folks in a way when, like you said, there's no question that manufactured homes a fine alternative. When we come back, I want to talk to you about two bills. I guess they were vetoed by the governor, but yet they still went into effect in some form. We'll explain that when we come back. We are speaking with Cheryl Brown. She is a member of the California State Assembly. She represents significant portions of the Inland Empire, including the city of San Bernardino, which is on its way back, no doubt. My name is Brad Pomerance. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So let's talk about the two bills that technically were vetoed by the governor, but somehow, some way, Cheryl Brown made sure that they didn't die a slow death. And one of them deals with, we'll call it an AWOL policy.
Right.
It's when someone leaves employment, and they're state employees, is that right?
They're state employees, generally people who are working, and I don't want to say working poor, but
Okay.
people who are generally not making as much money
Okay,
as
fair
others.
enough.
And they get sick.
Right,
Maybe they're hospitalized
right.
and can't call into work. Well, the policy right now is you have 5 days. And what was happening is people weren't waiting for 5 days, weren't waiting at all. And they would fire the person.
They would be terminated, right?
Right.
For being AWOL. I mean,
Right.
the expression AWOL.
Right. And they had no recourse except to go to administrative law judge.
Right.
The administrative law judge, as we understand it and our research says, is that they've never returned that person back to work. So what we've said in this particular bill is it's not fair. There should be a way for them to bring a note in from a doctor or whatever.
If there was a legitimate
if there's a
reason.
legitimate reason for them to be absent for that 5 days. So in his veto message, the governor, in his infinite wisdom, said, with this veto message, I'm instructing HR,
Human resources,
to make this a policy, to look at this and make this a policy, because it shouldn't have been a bill. It should have never been a bill.
Right. It's really a regulatory matter.
Right. It's regulatory. And I think that once we can do more with the regulatory issues, the better it'll be.
I mean, you've said we have too many laws on the books. So if a regulation...
We have so many laws on the books that people don't know it's a law.
It's true.
You really don't know.
It's true.
Because there's so many. But regulations should be celebrated, let's say.
I mean, in this case.
Right, and they should be regulations that are good for the people.
Another bill that got vetoed, but somehow you kicked it back to life. I don't know how you do it, Cheryl Brown. It dealt with the definition of a micro enterprise. It's a little inside baseball, and trying to offer training to those that are looking to develop micro enterprises.
Right.
So what happened with the governor, and how did you bring it back to life?
Well, you know, it's not so much that we brought it back to life, but I am the chair of the Select Committee on Small Business Development.
Right.
And there's a bunch of other words to go with that.
Small business financing and development opportunities. Something like this. There it is.
And I had a hearing.
Right.
And Tim Rainey, who is in charge of workforce development for our state, came to that hearing. And what he said was, you know, I think your bill makes sense. I think we need to incorporate it into the workforce development boards. And and he started working at it before the governor vetoed it.
In a way, a type of regulation or a policy change.
And what it does is it actually helps businesses. You know, we have small businesses that need to have technical experience. They need to know, they need financing. He is now able to help them with the education that it takes to do that. Then they can create more jobs, and California can be better off.
I want to talk more about small business because, like you said, you chair the Small Business Financing and Development Opportunities Committee, and we know that small businesses, I think it's 2/3 of all Americans work for small businesses.
Especially in California.
Right, and so as we look through 2014, what are you hoping to accomplish on the small business front? How do you intend to be that advocate for the small business person?
I will continue to either author or co-author legislation. Yesterday on the floor, I guess it was Tuesday.
Whenever.
Yeah, yesterday on the floor. I am the principal co-author of a bill that will again deal with micro enterprises.
Okay.
And we're going to kick it up and say, okay, micro enterprise should be 10 or less rather than 5 or less. And we are going to start working to make micro businesses and to make these smaller businesses successful.
So if the definition expands, they could have access to additional capital because micro, you know, in today's economy, 10 could be micro. I mean, there's no doubt. And
well, we don't have big businesses anymore. We don't have huge businesses that hire. I mean, that's a rare commodity. Let's look at what we do have and build on that.
Okay, her name is Cheryl Brown. She is a member of the California State Assembly. She represents significant portions of the Inland Empire. My name is Brad Pomerance. I want to thank you so much for watching California Edition. We'll be right back.